and I don't know, go wild. Pun crazy. Bun, asta hai să-l dăm așa ca să vedem și noi ce facem. Alright, здравствуйте everyone. So, when we're taping this is the election day, and I thought that it would be a good idea to show you around how Sofia feels, well, on election day. So we spent the morning trying to convince people to give us a statement on in front of the camera. So, that was in the morning.
We are joined here by the proletariat of the Soviet Union.
The initial plan was to tape this segment in front of the vandalized statues. We only found the statues, but not the
not the vandalized part.
Yeah, not the improvements that the Bulgarian people had brought to the Soviet statues. This is how they used to look like just several months ago. But unfortunately they got cleaned up and made to look again, I guess the Soviets would call it normal, we would just call it terrible, but it is what it is. So, lots of division, nobody knows for sure who's going to win the election, nobody knows for sure whether someone is going to win the election. When we're taping this, of course, we don't know the result just yet. We have a decent idea of what will happen. Roughly speaking, okay, I'll say it. Roman Radev will probably be re-elected. Maybe not outright. There's going to be a need for a second round, but generally speaking, Roman Radev will be president of Bulgaria for at least another 5 years. But when it comes to the parliament, not even those who are strong supporters of one party or the other, not even those are very convinced that there will be a new government following these parliamentary elections. The only thing that we know for sure is that this will be the last round of elections for 2021. That's the only thing that we can know for sure now before the closing of the polls. Even on alternative sources from political operatives, it's still a bit too early. It's only a bit over 3 p.m. In the evening, so we still don't have any exit polls. Although technically speaking, we aren't supposed to have any exit polls until 8 p.m., but probably by 5 p.m. we'll have an idea about who voted for whom. As always, it doesn't matter who votes for whom, it matters who counts the votes, but you get the point.
Like in a true democracy.
Like in a true democracy, da. Now, despite this kind of intro, the point is not really to poke fun at Bulgaria, because we found a lot of positive stuff in this country, and we were just looking through the newspaper. So here we have the newspaper 24 Chața, 24 hours, and first of all, it's a very thick newspaper. You don't see in most of Europe this kind of thing anymore. I mean, back home, just a few hundred kilometers up north from here, back in Romania, only tabloids and 1 or 2 sports newspapers are still in print. Basic general news like these ones, they either ceased to exist or they moved entirely online, either via subscription or free for the consumer but paid for by various special interest groups or advertising or Google itself or whatever. Same thing in Hungary. I mean, most of the printed press is straight up activist press and not really general type of news like this one. I guess in Scandinavia they're still around because there is that scheme of press support that can allow a certain newspaper. Of course, it's still unethical because what is their incentive to criticize the state if the state is the reason they still exist and haven't gone bankrupt?
Yeah, but at least I don't know about the other countries from the Scandinavia, but at least in Denmark, yes, it is the support of the government is support of the government through the people that vote the government itself, that they get the assistance.
Yeah, in Sweden you're basically supposed to have, I think, 2,000 subscribers or something like that, and you're eligible for press support. And of course, the bigger you get, the higher the amount you get from the government as well. That means Dagens Kukheter boggles up half of the subsidies, and about 30% goes to Aftonbladet. Yes, and the remaining 20% is divided among the rest of the press, that would, or as I call it, the real press in Sweden. So there's that. But still, I mean, at the very least in Scandinavia you can still find printed press. But Scandinavia and I guess Bulgaria would be the exception in Europe. Everywhere else, slowly the press, even corporatist or corporate big, quote-unquote big press, even this kind of press died in most of Europe. But well, it seems that it didn't die here. This is the newspaper for the weekend, for the 13th and the 14th of November 2021, Sobota Nedelya, Saturday and Sunday, and it's pretty thick, over 80 pages, I think. Yeah, exactly 80 pages, plus this supplement. So you know, it's for only 2 leva, so that's about €1, give or take, maybe €1.10 or something like that. I mean, it's quite cheap.
Very cheap, yeah, exactly.
Considering the length, the size of the newspaper, it's really not expensive. And what I've noticed is that even though it's the newspaper for the election weekend, it has very few partisan discussions in it. It has a lot of discussion concerning policy, of course, but the front article is about how the fee in a political party to be present on one of their election lists started from 222 leva. so that would be what, 120 euros ish. I mean, it's really not a
yes, it runs pretty much like an auction house. The price starts at 100 euros, and the more you pay, the higher up you're on the list.
The higher up you're on the list, yes. So basically, if you want to become a professional politician, Bulgaria is a place to start. It's definitely not expensive. So yeah. So it starts straight up with discussions about corruption, basically. That's what I wanted to emphasize. What I've noticed is that any discussion regarding the main topic in most of the Western Europe, that would be COVID-19. The first serious discussion about COVID-19 emerges at page 60, I think. Maybe a bit earlier. Hold on a second. Yes. So yeah, the first serious conversation about COVID starts at page 60. so I don't know if it's visible enough from the camera, but it's a very thick number of pages until you get to any discussion about COVID. Now, admittedly, once you get here, there are like 4 pages, 4, 5, 6 pages about medical topics. 3 of them are about COVID, and the other 3 are about diabetes and arthritis. So there's that. But what I wanted to emphasize is that unlike Romania and unlike to a certain extent Sweden or Moldova for this summer, unlike other places, neither COVID nor elections are considered main topics, at least for this new mainstream newspaper. But not just this. I mean, yesterday we were listening to the radio in the car, and the same thing. COVID-19 was like 12-15 seconds of the news bulletin, and about 25 seconds was dedicated to the elections. The whole news bulletin was like 10 minutes. So over 9 minutes of the 10 minutes were about anything else that was just not elections or COVID-19. How do they do it?
Well, getting back to what I said in the Romanian part of the short podcast we did in Plovdiv, it does look like the people here have something called what Miguel said. The people here have grit.
Yeah, they definitely do.
And they definitely have, as individuals, and obviously as individuals making up the society, they have more pressing issues in life rather than politics or an epidemic.
Yeah.
Because here it's already the epidemic stage.
More like an endemic stage. I mean, half of the city coughs. And it's not even an exaggeration. Like there's just so much coughing going around. I mean, and that's why just this morning the Minister of Health in Bulgaria was like, "What, a lockdown at this stage? Come on, get lost." There's not going to be a need for that in Bulgaria. And you know what? He has a point. I mean, considering that. About a third of the population has natural immunity, or infection-acquired immunity, I guess that's the correct term, and another third of the population is currently infected. And the third, I guess, would be the vaccinated one, and some of them have acquired the infection, some of them haven't, but they definitely will sometime soon. Yeah, it's not exactly. But the thing is that for some reason, and this has something to do with the benefits, this is what I was trying to explain to one of the people that was kind enough to give us a small interview, that it's not really a bad thing not to have a government. Because if all of the authorities are interim, they cannot, of course, make unpopular decisions or really any serious decisions,
Yeah.
popular or unpopular, because, they don't have the legal authority and the legitimacy to make such decisions. And once you're in that situation, eventually people are just going to adapt and figure things out on their own. And yes, of course, that creates disunity, which is the other lady that was complaining that there's disunity in this country. Well, yeah, of course. She was mentioning on economics and COVID that there's a lot of disunity. And I'm like, yeah, but is that a bad thing? After all, yeah, of course, it means that some people are wearing triple masks and only go to buy some essential food, and otherwise are quadruple vaccinated and stay indoors. Whereas other people, such as the kids behind us, they go outside and play some. Was that badminton? I think, yeah. And everyone figures their own situation, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that in this country they do practice what we like, but they don't like it that they have to practice. And it's a fascinating situation in a way.
Yeah, they'll get used to it.
I don't know if they will. I mean, in the end, most of life in Bulgaria following communism was kind of like this. They kind of had to figure things out on their own because competence in government wasn't really a thing, isn't really a thing, and won't be. But don't tell that to the voters of we continue the change.
Yeah. Probably the only party that ever had at least some competence was the former Tsar's party, but that disappeared in a few years. Just like
you're just showing how much of a boomer you are. I mean, the Tsarist party hasn't been a thing for more than 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. But at least he did something that, for example, in Romania, Michael didn't.
Yes, that's true.
Michael didn't want to run for president. Well, this guy did.
Yes,
and won.
That's true.
And Gerb's credits can actually be taken, especially Boyko Borisov, since he was part of Simeonov II's political party.
I was about to mention that of the current functional parties, and I don't like to admit that in public, but it's true, unfortunately. Of the current political parties, the only competent political party that is not outright communist is Gerb. Unfortunately, all of the voters of our age are like, let's hope Gerb doesn't win. So they voted for anything but Gerb. Now, of course, BSP, the Rumen Radev's party, is not really is not really preferred. I mean, people be like, Rumen Radev is okay, but his party is haram. So, so there's that. But it has to be mentioned, and I can't stress it enough. Here, the social situation is very similar to what we would prefer to have back home, but they don't like it that it is this way. Most of the voters that I had the privilege to discuss with, they were all like, we're hoping that we will have a fully legitimate government, but that can do things for people, and I kept on trying. Why?
Well, it's probably because they suffer from the same complex that we do in Romania, the daddy government complex.
In a way,
yeah.
Yes, because I even brought this up to a certain to one of the individuals that discussed with us, and I was like, well, in Belgium they stayed without a government for 3 years and a half. And it wasn't really such a serious problem. I mean, and they're like, yeah, but I was in Belgium, here is Bulgaria, and the guy was in a hurry, so I didn't continue the argument because I was there to take interviews, not to argue. But I was very tempted to say, I mean, the Belgians have 3 feet and 4 hands. I mean, what's exactly so special about Belgium that I mean, if anything, it should be a superior situation in Bulgaria, because at least Bulgaria is a country as opposed to Belgium. Yeah. So yeah, the thing is that probably this won't be the last set of elections, the way things are looking. But maybe by tonight, when the final results or quasi-final results will be announced, maybe we'll get contradicted. And if that happens, I'll still publish this video, so you guys can see our thought process and how we perceived the elections from the field. Even if I end up being wrong, I don't think I'll end up being wrong, but because yeah, it's not just disunity. Remember when we were kids and we were taught at the English class the concept of generation gap, right? And it used to be taught like in the 6th grade or 5th grade, something like that.
Yeah.
And at that time, when we were kids, the idea just didn't exist in Eastern Europe because, well, roughly speaking, the new generations would have a very similar life outlook as the previous generation. There were very minor differences between generations. I mean, yeah, sure, I was listening to a slightly different kind of music than my father, and I don't know, maybe preferred slightly different flavor of cigarettes because at least I had access to them, whereas my dad didn't, because communism and shit. But generally speaking, there wasn't much of a difference between generations. Now there is. And in Bulgaria, the gap is widening. Even
wider than it is Romania, and it
Yes.
keeps on widening
Yes.
at the same time.
Yes. I mean, from the median life outlook of a 25-year-old and the median life outlook of a 65-year-old, it isn't a 40-year difference. Sometimes it's like a 140-year difference. It's just the difference is just irreconcilable. And until biology fixes that problem, and it's going to take a while, and apparently not even COVID-19 is fast enough for that. Until biology fixes that problem, generally by physical removal of the boomers, it's kind of difficult to create a stable government, unless there will be a low turnout. And it seems, at least for the first 4 or 5 hours when we observed physically the polling stations, it seemed that prediction was coming to fruition. Very low turnout to the polls. Even lower than, at least until 1 p.m. definitely, lower than in Romania in December 2020. I mean, in December 2020, by 1 p.m. there was about 20%. Or 18%, something like that. Here it was barely a bit over 10, so much lower turnout to the polls. Now, admittedly, it's also a smaller country, so all it takes is 2 viral posts on Facebook, and it can change the entire turnout. That's the fascinating part about these smaller countries, that anything can change. As I was saying, there's not much in this newspaper. I was hoping to see, because this morning we were like, okay, let's buy the local press again. And only tabloids and sports newspapers, and those related to the news. This was the only one that at least had a headline related to politics. All the others, they had, there's an important match of CSKA Sofia, there's some local tennis player, female tennis player has managed some performance somewhere. I don't know, I don't watch tennis, I don't like tennis, but everyone had a different headline that was just not related to what would appear for those of us immersed into the 24 news cycle, what would appear to be the most important topics. I mean, it's probably why this one, 24 Chasa, would be the only one that resembles what we would expect it to see. So yeah, of course, for the most part, while we were talking, you were watching footage from Sofia. Basically, it's not demoralization. I mean, from afar, it may look like demoralization, but the more time we spend here, the more we realize that it's not demoralization. It's more like, who gives a shit kind of an attitude, right? Oh, so there's more COVID-19. Who gives a shit? Oh, but there's election. Who gives a shit? Right? Oh, but it's a hung parliament again. Nah, okay, whatever. so it's just, people don't give a shit about these things, and I'm not even saying that as a reproachment to the Bulgarian people. Quite the opposite. I'm thinking of who is the one that's creating the propaganda to make the people so disinterested of these topics? Because I want to import that model up north over the Danube.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, can we get some of that into our country as well?
and it's not just that here things are different, just as you said, but the proportion of people interested in politics, at least in Romania, is much bigger, but they're also very cringe.
Yeah, that's another aspect indeed. I mean, I don't know if as a proportion it's much bigger in Romania. Probably, I don't know. They're definitely much more numerous, but then again, Romania is 3 times bigger population-wise than Bulgaria, and also much more of a spread-out population as opposed to Bulgaria, which has basically 5-6 cities and almost nothing in between them, like physically nothing. There aren't people between the cities. I don't know if that's as a proportion, but definitely the people interested in politics in Romania, or Hungary for that matter, or Ukraine for that matter, they're much more cringe than the people interested in politics in Bulgaria. The people interested in, even those who are navigating into this world of politics, they're much more laid back. I guess taking back to that Novo, that hobo. We met an individual who was just very shy in admitting that he's from one of these new progressive parties. Definitely very involved in politics, very knowledgeable in the local politics of the country, particularly local administration. I mean, he's very interested in 2 specific districts of Sofia. But even he was much more tolerant and much more laid back about the situation. I was like, yeah, our politicians kind of suck, and yes, they're thieves, and yes, there is a mafia. But you know what, life is actually quite good, and I'm hoping to run for office and maybe unseat 1 or 2 of them and maybe implement some change. But he didn't have that militant kind of attitude that you can find in the Hungarian left, in the Romanian left, heck, in the Polish left. I'm not going to mention the German left, but okay, German, the German politics has always been cringe and a bit genocidal. But anyway, but what I'm saying is that somehow here, the reservoir of cringe seems to either have been exhausted or nobody imported a reservoir of cringe to begin with. And I'm still very curious, how do they do it? How do they do it? We need to replicate this model. Let's have a Europe full of Bulgarians. Yeah, but on the other hand, of course, there are other aspects. I mean, yeah, sure, these are the aspects that definitely made us smile and made us have a good time in this country. But of course, there are other aspects that are less than great, specifically economic management, which is absolutely terrible and haram. Yes. I mean,
But at least they got hot water
yes, yes. As opposed to Bucharest, there is hot water
and heating.
and heating. Yes, I guess. Yeah, but you know, the mayor here is not from Get Up, Down with the Mafia, or We Continue the Change, or any of these no-name parties that are, you know, new people in politics. You know, they have a proper establishmentarian. That is the mayor here. I think he's from the Socialist Party, from BPS. Anyway, either BPS or GERB, but you know, the proper establishmentarian. Whereas Bucharest, you know, decided to experiment and vote in new people, and as a result, you know, you kind of freeze to death into your own apartment in Bucharest. But I guess that was it. Hold on a second. Now that man, it was a tactic. People would now go more often to take the COVID-19 vaccine in the hope that they'll catch some fever as a result of the vaccine, and therefore they will not notice the cold in their houses. And also, of course, restart. I was about to say reset the vaccination campaign in Romania, as opposed to here, where you know nobody really, unironically, takes the vaccine.
Yeah, well, it was very funny. And close to the restaurant that we've eaten a few minutes ago before coming here, there was exactly one green tent that did the antigen test for 15 leva.
Yeah, 15 leva. That would be about €7 ish.
Yeah.
So a bit more expensive than in Italy. But cheaper than in Romania.
Yeah, you did the antigen test. They also printed you the paper, and everything was good.
Yeah, of course. I haven't looked closely, but it seemed from afar while I was looking into that tent that the pre-elevation of the test was approximate, to say the least. So, you know, as a result, I didn't call that place a testing ground, but rather, you know, the negative printing press, negative test printing press. Yeah. Although I don't know why people even go there well, I guess they have to travel to Serbia or whatever, and probably that's why. Because you know, inside the country you don't really need it. I mean, we got required once or twice.
Yeah, twice in both of them in restaurants.
Yeah, both of them in restaurants,
Yes,
and every time we said "Niet, do svidania." So there's that.
Yeah, the funniest highlight was exactly yesterday. There was this Russian restaurant which was suspiciously close to
an investment bank,
to an investment bank with Cyrillic
and the hedge
characters.
fund. Yeah, and the hedge fund that is laundering money from for the FSB, and the restaurant was asking for a COVID-19 pass. That was the last place I would have expected to be required such a document. Of course, we said no, and it just moved on to another hipster restaurant that did not require. So whatever. But yeah, it was quite funny. Now, in all fairness, COVID-19 isn't going well in this country. I mean, seriously speaking, there's just too many people dying as a result of the COVID-19. But, and I have to give credit here to the interim authorities in Bulgaria, they're like, well, there's nothing we can do about it. It is what it is.
And
you're just going to have to pay the tribute to the epidemic.
Exactly, virus gonna virus.
Virus gonna virus, yes, virus gonna virus. Now, admittedly, I guess that's acceptable in Bulgaria, not because people are less empathetic or whatever bullshit panic arts tell to each other, but because it's an interim authorities, and you know, interim authorities are not politically accountable, because you know what you're gonna do, not vote for them. So, and I guess that's why they can afford to say, you know what, virus gonna virus, it is what it is.
Yeah, and at the same time, at least here, we haven't seen the interim excesses that we've seen in Romania with passing administrative acts which are wholly unconstitutional.
Oh, it happened here too. But here the amount of scandal resulted from that is and was much lower because, well, first of all, you have fewer people interested in politics, so fewer people notice that, that they're unconstitutional. And secondly, it doesn't matter whether they're by law or by government decree, or it's not like anyone observes them anyway. So
yeah,
why protest a bill that you're not going to observe anyway?
Yeah, that's also true. At least, yeah, okay. I meant what I said earlier. Okay, they may have been implemented, but then at the ground level, they are definitely not.
Yeah, I mean, that's another aspect that maybe we should borrow from our neighbors in Bulgaria. For some reason, they managed to, simply ignore. It's one. Admittedly, this is true for almost all of Eastern Europe. What I was saying yesterday, that a lot of bullshit have passed through our countries, not just Bulgaria and Romania, but also Ukraine, Poland, Hungary, and so on. A lot of bullshit has passed over and through our countries, and we refuse to change. This one shall pass as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, those more naive and more into worshipping at the altar of the law will end up being, resetted, whereas we won't, because in the meantime, let's notice this particular act of populism. The members of the European Parliament that come from Bulgaria will give 25% of their income to Bulgarian hospitals to fight the pandemic. Bulgaria was also the first country that cut away all of the dignitaries' incomes to zero during the state of emergency, and it passed unanimously through the parliament back in 2020. So this kind of thing, it was thought of as populism, although again the next Euro parliamentarian elections are in 3 years, so 2 years and something. So they're kind of far away. Everyone will have forgotten about this by then. This is another aspect that probably the rest of the world should take note. I mean, can you imagine Nancy Pelosi getting 0 shekels because there's a lockdown in her state and not much shekels are being paid for in taxes? I can't imagine like that. Or occasional cortex, same thing. 0 shekels for you.
Yeah, if we were to enumerate just at least the highlights of politicians who will definitely not do such a charitable act, then this fragment will take at least 4 hours to tape.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So yeah, probably we'll see a second round in the presidential elections with Rumen Radev getting 40% or so, and the second one being the nominally independent, in reality Gerb supported candidate from he's the current president of the Bulgarian Academy. So there's that. Whereas in the parliament, as the electorate has also said in front of the polling station, who knows, man?
There'll be dragons.
There'll be dragons, yes. I mean, probably Gerb is going to be first, but not by much. And probably BPS will be second at a very small difference between the first and the second. And yeah, good luck with the coalition negotiation, I guess. By the way, the election threshold is 4%. For better or worse, everyone expects 7 political parties to pass the threshold. So coalition building is going to be a bitch.
Yeah.
Especially considering that of the 7 parties, at least 5 groups of 5 hate each other. So it's going to be quite difficult to build a coalition. But hey, it is what it is. One reason, and of course we're going to delve a lot more into analysis once we get back to Romania and give much more thought to what we've seen, and also get to review more of the footage that we've taken and we will continue to take over the next several days. This is in many ways the future of Europe. I was discussing one of our apartment neighbors here in Sofia. He's from Norway, but quite interested in politics as well, and he was also quite up to speed with Swedish politics. And we were discussing that probably the next one after Bulgaria with the fragmented parliament come in Sweden. And after Sweden it's going to be another one and another one. This is as the generation gap becomes wider, are going to have much more fragmented parliaments. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be a very glorious experiment in Bulgaria. because it's probably the least experienced country with fragmented government and fragmented parliament. So it's going to be fun to see them try for a third time in a row to build a coalition. Probably even most of the electorate expects it to fail, and probably organize another round of elections in 2022. And there is no limit. I mean, you can have snap elections 3 times a year, every year, until you finally build a stable coalition that lasts 4. So, yeah. Is there anything that I forgot to mention?
No, that's about it.
That will be about it. All right. Then we'll be back after the results are announced and discuss those. It's probably going to be from the Derby Dragons. I mean, I fully do expect tonight, when I look at the results from the election commission, to be, what the hell did just happen? I mean, it's not entirely excluded to see, like, I don't know, ITN, for instance, being the largest party. It's entirely possible. ITN is a populist party that opposes vaccine mandates and opposes the current political parties and thinks that half of the political class should be jailed, which I think is very moderate and sensible, of course. I would have proposed the impalement, but then again, here I show my ethnical origins. Alrighty, so with that said, thanks for watching. See you around. Cheers.
Cheers.